G'day Australia. A lot of you might know who I am. My name's Steve. I've just got this letter that I'd like to read to everybody. Dear Australians, in this difficult time, we ask that you look at what is going on and finally define what it means to stand up together as a people. In the months leading up to what was known to be coming in the end of this usufruct, a merger of usufruct controlled by the United Nations is upon your doorstep. We turn our address to the politicians and leaders of this country who wholeheartedly believe they had taken an oath to serve the country and its people. You have served a foreign power and taken oath of allegiance outside of the Commonwealth of Australia by technical definition, and have, in doing so, desecrated the memory of Anzac and all they stood for in peace agreements at the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. If you are a member of the police service, the Australian Defence Forces, the Parliament, the judiciary, or anything outside of the executive branches of government, we ask you very clearly to think about the position you hold and the value it is to your family, your home, your friends, during this demise of the country we all live in and enjoy. Today marks a very dark day in Australia's history. The state has blatantly and without remorse turned on its own citizens. With rubber bullets and guns pointed at unarmed civilians, weapons being fired at unarmed men surrendering with their arms in the air, all while Victorian police taunt protesters to attack, it seems to be clear that as the state, you might be unaware of the laws of armed conflict that are playing out before your very eyes. Laws that you are wholly complicit in and obligated to. Laws that demonstrate to you what is occurring before everyone's eyes is an act of war, and could be at the laws of armed conflict considered to be serious war crimes. In the recent year, you have demonstrated your alliance with BLM when police across Australia bend the knee to another power without even thinking of what it means to bend the knee to something. And yet today you have a full Nazi-style power force pushed onto Australians under the guise of health concerns, concerns which you have demonstrated to be complicit in creating with a preemptive biosecurity legislation that seeks to take control of not only the food bowl but also business and manufacturing. Are you sure you have signed up for the correct parliament? Are you sure that the oath of allegiance you have taken is in line with the foundations of this country when you are seeing the laws of armed conflict based in Hague and Geneva Conventions first defined in 1864 and sealed across the world in 1899 start to play out before your very eyes? It is from this standing that we have attempted for over a decade not only to inform you as politicians, but also warn you as Australians of the impending disaster that a usufruct agreement made by political leaders in the 50s and 60s would make if you didn't wake up very quickly to the fact that it was actually you, under oath of allegiance to a power foreign, displaying foreign crowns and foreign flags in the land, that had caused this demise. From Quentin Bryce to the current Governor-General, through many Attorney General's departments, we have seen the demise of social justice in this country in place of a militarised power grab in home affairs. You have certainly become Nazi Germany overnight. Might it be because of your ignorance dipping into the IMF reserve tank instead of building the Commonwealth of the people? None of you wanted to listen. And now you are seeing firsthand those laws of armed conflict play out that you were constantly warned about. Instead of listening to us and the concerns we had for this very Commonwealth of Australia under rules of usufruct, as per the Hague Conventions, you instead sent the police around like your private militarised Jesuit force to attempt to manipulate us into saying something out of context so that you could take advantage. You sent police around to pregnant mothers' homes. You smashed through the front doors of people's homes for posting on social media, and you openly fired a handgun into a vehicle for refusing to stop at one of your health checkpoints. Yet you somewhat justify this because you are a Member of Parliament. You are actually a complete disgrace. Have you now considered that you might be totally ignorant of the problem, and that may actually be the cause of the problem in that ignorance? And now today you have fired upon your own people for standing up for themselves against a tyrannically governing body, obviously being told what to do under United Nations smart city agendas. While premiers of the states attempt to shut down borders that were repealed in the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution, the people who are the naked owners of this usufruct agreement are being terrorised by those that took oath of allegiance to this authority deep in your own executive branches. It is clear to the people who their enemy became. This now begs the question, as a Member of Parliament, as a politician that is supposed to serve the people, supposed to serve the community and all Australians, and especially in defence and growth of this great Commonwealth of Australia, who do you actually serve? What oath of allegiance have you made, and can you be fully assured that your allegiances are based in the very foundations of this country? Because if you cannot, you may not only be committing war crimes against the people, you may actually be committing acts of treason against the foundations defined at international law by ancestors of this Commonwealth of Australia. Now, turning back to address all Australians, whether you are from another land, whether your culture is different or not, you all came here for the freedom from war and tyrannical rule of government. Some have crossed the seas at great expense, losing loved ones along the way, to join in the sacred land we all enjoy and call this Commonwealth of Australia. At this time, you are being treated as prisoners of warfare under the laws of armed conflict. You are currently in lockdown, which is a prison term used when they lock all doors and put prisoners in their cells. This is usually because of a riot or something like an escape. I am asking all of you to remain calm. I am asking you to all avoid the UN force that is the state police force altogether. It is in your own hearts that you will change the future of this Anglican Protestant-based Commonwealth, wherein as brothers united, we defend. It is in realising that you have been piggybacking off someone else's money supplies and allowing them to control your trade routes. A Commonwealth where this administration government has openly undermined your Anzac and attacked you in front of your Anglican churches without a word from those governing bodies. When as a society we can return to the financial foundations of exchange in real value, already defined in law, instead of passing around debt currencies based on a Reserve Bank of Australia, a foreign corporate entity and national creditor, maybe we can address the actual problem of the United Nations playing debt collector. These politicians are not decision makers. They are merely a theatre in play to give you something to argue about daily, while you ignore the problem that gives them an unusual amount of power in the first place. Consider that militarised state police forces often deny politicians because they know they are obligated to the laws of armed conflict in play relative to the Hague Conventions and the rules regarding the recovery of debt in accordance with international treaty. In this time we have rediscovered the history of Anzac and the Federal Red Ensign in use until 1953, when a foreign crown replaced the imperial crown and eventually took your admiralty in 1967. We ask you to fly it proudly, demonstrating your heritage, your ancestry, and your birthrights as all Australians of all cultures, a birthright defended and proclaimed by Anzac on a world stage at the sacrifice of 62,000 men. We have discovered the compassing of the people done by this definitively occupying crown and governance, and the links to the international laws of armed conflict, and the possibilities that political leaders and others in command may actually be committing war crimes at this time, recently demonstrated in Melbourne by firing upon unarmed civilians showing the international symbol for surrender by putting their arms high up in the air. we ask the people to stand together under the blood and guts of the Federal Red Ensign, so dubbed by the very Anzac you find your heritage in. In doing this, we ask you to find leaders amongst yourselves that can speak on your behalf and not act like children, protesting and scrapping to be heard. It is in unity and strength with men that can stand up and speak for their communities that will help you in defending each other merely by those numbers. If you see red, be united instead. It will be in helping each other, in defending and standing up for each other, that you will start to have a voice against this now obviously military takeover of your Commonwealth of Australia, likely to be forced into a republic by the model of John Howard, who has now obviously demonstrated a direct act of treason by disarming the land forces of Australia in the very people, or has demonstrated he is the enemy of the Commonwealth with a want to destroy it and replace it with a different model. Your Anzac volunteered to go and defend the very lands they occupied as a Commonwealth of Australia in 1914. Their memory has been desecrated in the removal of the very defence of the lands itself, and by the people of the lands by their own hand. To return to this ideal is to render unto Caesar all that is Caesar's, and render unto God all that is God's. This is to comprehend that administration government, its IMF reserve currency, and its United Nations trade agendas and models are that Caesar, and returning to what is being administered is that which your Anzac left you. It is unfortunate to state that this predicament means that the foundations defined by Anzac in international waters are under international administration and arbitration, leaving a single option on the table in returning to what was founded as a Commonwealth that is now under administration. All other options will leave you to fight a war you can never win against the international body of sovereign entities that will have you play within the rules already agreed to. It is in demonstrating who you are as a people occupied and under administration by foreign interests, a power that removed your Admiralty ensign in 1967 in accordance with agreements forced upon the international world at Geneva and Hague Conventions from 1864 through to 1907. Once you realise that unity, you can demonstrate it to them. You know who you are in this international theatre. You are occupied. You are prisoners of war in accordance with Geneva Conventions. You are under administration, and you now remember who you are. This would then make you awake as a society, loyal in one flag, as one people, just as Queen Victoria laid out for you when the repeal of all the colonial borders occurred and you became one body politic. The states have taken this from you and put back up those borders. You are being swept up in an act of bio-warfare where enemy players have attempted to undermine your crown and country even further in an attempt to fully take it over. This foreign administration government already put legislation in the Biosecurity Act 2015 and built a fence around Parliament to protect itself from something that would be big enough to demand a fence. Might that something be extremely pissed off population? I would like politicians to explain why they need a fence around themselves given the current climate and our knowledge of the rules of usufruct. I would like them to explain why they required biosecurity legislation 6 years ago when we have been through 2 world wars and the Spanish flu, never seeing a government act this authoritarian. Is it because you are a foreign administrator in our lands? For an alleged, and we do say alleged, virus with a 99% survival rate, where there have been no deaths of the coronavirus 19 in Victoria in 2021, but there have been 276 suicides from the 1st of January through the May the 31st. There are no numbers of suicides for the last 3 months. Last year's total coroner confirmed suicides by May 31st last year was 315 and a total of 713 for the last year in total. What this demonstrates is that this government has caused a crime against humanity by stealth and are lying to all of you. And what is worse is that suicides are 1,000 times worse than this pandemic they planned to have over 5 years ago. Last year, when BLM was destroying American properties by burning and looting, Australian police bent their knee to BLM. Victorian Police Assistant Commissioner Luke Cornelius has demonstrated his bias and selected side when he defends the destruction of property across the world for a corporate entity called Black Lives Matter, registered for fundraising in the United States, has his forces bend the knee to them. Assistant Commissioner is quoted to have said on television media that protesting is not unlawful, it's a human right. The current actions of Victorian police against normal everyday Australians of no demonstrated side, hurt financially by this government, continue to demonstrate that Victorian police are working for powers outside of the Victorian Parliament and a neglect for any previous statements they have made. It has become very clear that the police of the states and this administrative Australia have chosen their sides, a side that seeks for the very destabilisation of this Commonwealth of Australia at the very core, again under a crown foreign, a flag foreign, and an oath of allegiance foreign to the foundations of this Commonwealth of Australia in a definitive and specific way. It is your families, your sons, your daughters that have chosen to work for this machine in our lands. Last year, when we raised our federal red ensign during consecration service at war memorials across Australia, at the Shrine of Remembrance, the Victorian police at first attempted to stop us. We were asked to move on due to the problem that may follow on behind us. It is at this time we caught very clearly Channel 7 media setting up a scene for Victorian police, wherein two people were forcibly masked by officers on camera. This appeared later on the 6 o'clock news as frontline story, showing two citizens being forced at the hand of police to wear masks, a clear and obvious fear tactic and propaganda machine at work. So fly red instead. Your Anzac did not die for a blue flag with a 7-pointed star. This flag was not introduced into your lands until 1908, when the Commonwealth of Australia signed Hague Conventions, and even then it sat in the background waiting. In 1953, the Flags Act introduced parliamentary legislation over Admiralty flags, and eventually in 1967, your Admiralty flag was lowered for the last time. You have forgotten what your Anzac died for, and it lies underneath this foreign administration and its blue ensign, so fly red instead. Lastly, I'd like to say my thoughts are with the 200 arrested who have been harmed by the Victorian Police Force and those that were injured by the state and its parliamentary force. Our thoughts are with the millions of Australians of all backgrounds that have been harmed by this administrating government over the last 70 years. Recently, you have had the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews directly threatening physical harm on Victorian people by telling them not to go out, or they will spend many Sundays in hospital, while on a television interview on a major television network. You've had Kevin Rudd attack the Liberal Nationals in their failure, leading to deaths that don't seem to be recorded by the coroner's office. And you have a muppet for a Prime Minister that everyone remembers left the country during one of its worst fire disasters in modern history. A clear demonstration of not being in control. The disgrace that has become the demise of this Australian harmony and solidarity is now before your very eyes. And for the future, you have a choice. Do you stand up as does your red ensign flying Australians in the lineage of your Anzac, defining standing in international waters, or do you let the United Nations walk in through the door, for the IMF, where they already told you you will own nothing and you will enjoy it. The world is watching, and how you all speak now will determine your futures. A desert flame will rise in this country and begin to shine a light on all those around you as they begin to realise how they have been conned for the last century. So that's the end of this letter. I can't really say much more, so thank you for listening.